Okay, I mean, I just can't stop thinking about the part where he basically says that for a genius, talking to an average person feels exactly like talking to a severely mentally retarded person. Like, holy shit, that is a fucking insane way to frame it. But the math he uses actually makes you stop and think.
Yeah, it's designed to be completely jarring, absolutely.
Mm.
But when we dig into the actual numbers Aaron Clarey is putting forward in The Curse of the High IQ, I mean, it validates that math without, necessarily endorsing the insult.
Right.
Because the whole mission of what we're looking at today is to understand why having an abnormally high IQ, like anything north of 130, why that is actually a statistical nightmare that actively ostracizes people from society.
Yeah, and he anchors that whole concept of relative intelligence with this anecdote from his own high school experience, which is
Mm.
just it's brutal. So he's at this mandatory assembly, right?
Uh-huh.
And the local congressman is on stage trying to hype up the crowd, and he asks, "How many members of Congress are there?" Dead silence. And Clarey, who tested at a 138 IQ, just wants it to be over, so he blurts out 535.
Right, he just knows it.
Yeah, but then immediately, this average sophomore sitting behind him taps him on the shoulder and is like, "Hey, Einstein, how many beers are in a case?" And Clarey doesn't know, so he guesses 12, and the kid just sneers at him like, "That's 16. Shows you how much you know."
Which is just the perfect illustration of relative intelligence, because look at the mechanics of that interaction. Clarey is at 138. That sophomore, statistically, is probably right in the middle of the bell curve at roughly a 95 IQ.
Right.
That is a 43-point gap. In psychometric terms, that is almost 3 full standard deviations.
Which, I mean, that doesn't sound that crazy until you run the math in the opposite direction.
Precisely. So if you take an average everyday person with an IQ of 100
Yeah.
and you subtract 43 points from them, you arrive at an IQ of 57.
Which is literally clinically impaired.
Exactly. An IQ of 57 means someone who fundamentally struggles to perform basic daily tasks. So, if you flip it from the cognitive perspective of a 138 IQ, interacting with an average person requires the exact same level of exhausting patience, the same translation of reality as an average person talking to someone who is severely impaired.
That is wild. I mean, if you're listening to this, imagine you are forced to live in a world where everything, the roads, the laws, the TV shows, is designed for people who operate at half your mental speed. You'd lose your fucking mind.
You would be perpetually exhausted. And that's what Clarey calls the idiocracy of reality. Because society is built for the masses, the dominant culture reflects average intelligence. It's why we have this obsession with the Kardashians or Oprah or what he just dismissively calls sports ball.
Oh, yeah, where he points out that we pour trillions of hours into watching a ball cross a painted line while actual existential problems are just ignored.
Right, so for the smart outlier, you're not just bored. You are deeply miserable and isolated in a culture that mathematically cannot care about complex things.
And the craziest part is, society doesn't just wait until you're an adult to isolate you. If society is built for the average majority, how does it handle the highly intelligent from a young age? It basically locks them in a 13-year mental gulag.
Yeah, the education system, which we have to remember was built 160 years ago on the Prussian model.
Right, the Prussian model.
Yeah, it was engineered to mass produce obedient, punctual factory workers.
Yeah.
Standardized tests, bells ringing, strict obedience. It was absolutely not built to nurture free-thinking geniuses.
He literally compares it to a maximum security prison. The crowd control, the cinder block walls with no windows demanding blind obedience.
It's all about conformance. And the psychological torture for the genius kid gets worse when Clarey brings up his controversial claim about the teachers themselves. He points to data suggesting education majors often have some of the lowest IQs among college graduates.
Okay, but wait, I gotta push back on this. If the teacher is actually dumber than the genius student, what happens when the student just gets bored and falls asleep? Do they just think they're stupid?
Exactly. That is the tragedy of it. The system measures conformance, not intellect. So a genius kid finishes a worksheet in 3 minutes, has to sit in a hard plastic chair for 40 minutes, and they check out. And because they're a kid, they assume the adult authority figure is right.
Wow.
So they misdiagnose their own brilliance as stupidity, or if they do the bare minimum and act out from boredom, the system misdiagnoses them with ADD or ADHD.
Oh, the Ritalin trap.
Yes, They get drugged with Ritalin just to chemically force them to comply with this 160-year-old factory mold.
That is just bleak. But then everyone says, oh, just get to college. College is where the smart people are. But he calls college high school 2.0.
Because of progressive credentialism. The labor market got flooded, the government subsidized loans, so universities just expanded to absorb the cash.
And created all these useless degree programs for average intellects.
Right. So you get this environment filled with what he calls faux intellectuals. People with $80,000 in debt for a degree in, like, 17th century French poetry, acting completely superior to the STEM majors who are actually doing complex math.
Just totally confusing a piece of paper with actual brain power.
Exactly.
Okay, so you survive the 13-year prison sentence, you get through high school 2.0, and you finally hit the real working world, assuming your genius will finally be rewarded. But the corporate world is just as hostile, if not worse.
Oh, it's definitely worse, because now your survival depends on it. And the gatekeeper is almost always the HR department.
God, I was swearing out loud reading this part. The agonizing interview process. You've got a veteran petroleum engineer sitting across from a 24-year-old HR rep who literally asks, what's your favorite color?
It's absurd. And Clarey tells that story about driving through a massive blizzard in South Dakota just to interview at a bank.
Yes.
He risks his life, gets there at 4 a.m., sleeps in his car, nails the technical interview, and then gets rejected because he didn't smile enough for the manager.
Because he was exhausted from almost dying in the snow.
Right, but it shows how society values feelings over reality. He calls it the Oprah effect. Smart people see logical, math-based solutions, but average people demand soft skills and emotional validation above all else.
Which leads right into bosses and the Peter principle. I want to talk about this because companies don't reward intelligence, they reward compliance. So average people keep getting pushed up the ladder until they reach a job they absolutely cannot do.
Their exact level of incompetence. That's the Peter principle.
And that's who becomes your boss. It's like an abusive relationship. The boss knows their opposer, so they gaslight the genius employee into thinking that they, the smart person, are the problem.
They have to, because a highly intelligent person seeks efficiency. Clarey talks about spending months building a massive 20-year Excel model that automated 90% of the underwriting process at his bank.
Which is a masterpiece of efficiency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his boss, this guy he calls Paul, realized that efficiency threatened his own obsolete fiefdom. So instead of praising Clarey, Paul actively sabotages him in front of executives over a minor formatting preference. Not even a math error.
Just pure sadistic ego protection.
Yep. The boss protects his territory by crushing the genius.
Okay, so work is a dead end, but what about personal life, socializing, dating? According to the text, this is where the math of the bell curve truly just punishes you.
It's the attrition of friends. When you're in school, you have an artificial concentration of peers. You can find the 5 other smart kids. But in adulthood, that social life crashes.
Because friends move away, or they get married, have kids, or honestly, by age 40, they just lose their energy to debate philosophy at midnight.
Right, and trying to fix it locally is mathematically impossible. Clarey talks about looking for intellectual peers and finding a Chicago economics meetup group. Now, Chicago has 8 million people.
8 million. And how many showed up?
6 attendees.
That is depressing.
The internet is basically the only saving grace for finding intellectual peers globally.
Which brings us to dating. And man, he does not pull any punches here. Let's start with the guys. He brings up this hot, crazy matrix.
Yes, looking at male dating through this lens.
Right, because men, even genius aerospace engineers, he says they let their small head override their big head. They chase highly attractive women who are completely shielded from reality, so they become insufferable or manipulative, and the smart guys just ignore their own intellect and end up in massive debt and misery.
It's biology overriding the neocortex. But the dating minefield for highly intelligent women is arguably a worse statistical trap.
Yeah, the emasculation problem. Break down his perspective on this, because it's pretty controversial.
It is. Now, impartially speaking, the author claims that social scientists have spent decades trying to erase traditional gender roles. So you have a lot of passive emasculated men. But he argues that a highly intelligent woman's biology still demands a traditional masculine protector.
But the only smart guys she meets have bought into that sensitive 90s man trope, so she's frustrated.
Exactly. And then you add the math of the IQ bell curve. The curve is tighter for women and flatter for men.
Wait, what does that mean practically?
It means there are more men at the absolute bottom, which is why men win the Darwin Awards, but slightly more men at the extreme high end. But because high IQ men are totally fine dating average IQ women if they're attractive, it creates a massive supply and demand imbalance for the 130-plus IQ women. They have virtually no one left.
So you have no peers, your workplace is hostile, your dating pool is a complete disaster, the highly intelligent mind inevitably turns inward. What happens when a genius actually solves all their basic life problems?
That's where we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Clarey explains that the brain evolved to solve life or death problems. A poor soldier captured by ISIS is terrified, yes, but he has clear purpose: survival.
Right.
Now take a rich retired surgeon with $20 million in the bank. He has absolutely no problems. So his evolutionary programming breaks. It leads to deep depression and ennui.
And this is where the three drugs come in. I love the Bill Burr example for this because Bill Burr is a comedic genius. He flies actual helicopters. He has a massive podcast. He makes cartoons. How the hell can he be bored? He literally said he drinks because he's bored. Is being that busy just a fucking coping mechanism?
Yes. Clarey calls this sublimation. It's a socially acceptable drug. Geniuses use extreme hobbies or workaholism or illegal drugs to numb their hyperactive brains.
Wow.
But just like booze, you build a tolerance to novelty. You ride a motorcycle all the way to Alaska, and a week later, your brain is bored again. It's just a drug to escape the reality that you have no existential purpose.
Okay, so society actively obstructs your greatness. The masses are, in his words, envious parasites, and your brain is eating itself from boredom. What the hell do you actually do?
Clarey's solutions are pretty misanthropic.
Yeah.
First, test your IQ immediately so you have empirical proof you aren't crazy.
You just need to know it's the world that's slow, not you.
Right. Second, become an entrepreneur to escape sadistic bosses. And third, embrace minimalism so you need less money. Because, and this is his political stance, he views democracy and progressive taxation as systems where the envious masses just legally steal from the productive genius, which inevitably leads to misanthropy.
Look, if you are listening to this and you've ever felt like an eagle surrounded by turkeys, which is his exact phrase, this is why. You aren't broken, the world just isn't built for you.
But I'll leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Clarey suggests you either become a hedonist or push through the hate as an entrepreneur. But consider this alternative. If society inherently targets and punishes outlier intelligence, is the ultimate expression of genius actually learning how to flawlessly camouflage yourself as average, hiding your true intellect just so they leave you the hell alone?